Welcome back to another edition of Research Fantasy presents our NASCAR DFS picks for the Pure Michigan 400 at Michigan International Speedway, coming to you on Sunday, August 13th, 2017. It will be a very fun race. This is the fastest track in NASCAR, I believe, and we'll see 200 laps run. So it's going to be a good race. Very excited for it. Just want to touch very briefly on strategy. 200 laps yields 50 laps led points, 100 fastest lap points. There's probably a pretty strong correlation there. You get out in the lead, you're running in open air. It's likely to probably give you some fastest laps. I don't think it's 100% like 50 laps led will not equal 100 fastest laps, especially with a guy like Jimmie Johnson starting in the rear, trying to come to the front. I think he will eat up a lot of the fastest laps. My overall strategy, because 50 laps leads point, it's just not a lot. If we were talking 200 at one of the, mile-long tracks, different story, different strategy altogether. But here, the way it's going to play out, I'm looking for two things. Where is the guy going to finish in my mind? And the place differential points. There aren't any, nobody didn't qualify. So right there, you don't have any, layups. Kyle Larson starting 39th is not going to give you 30 place differential points this week. So it basically comes down to looking for guys that probably have a 6 to 8 place differential upside and can finish between first and ideally 8th. That's kind of what I'm looking for here. I think you could see a situation where you're able to see more than that, but that's kind of what I'm holding true to right now. Couple of notes here. Danny Hamlin awaiting the birth of his second child. If that does take place, he will exit the car. I believe his name is Chris Hill, will drive in his place. Hamlin will still accrue the points regardless of who's driving because he's starting. As long as he starts, I'm assuming whoever's driving the car is going to get the points, right? That's what it's going to come down to. But the situation is switching drivers at a non-caution, if that's how it happens to take place, I cannot guarantee. I don't know if they're going to wait until a caution to switch out drivers. I don't know if he's going to come in. I just don't like this situation. We went through this with Trevor Bayne a few months ago, came out on the right side of it. But you're looking at a less experienced and less quality driver. If Hamlin is forced to exit the vehicle, it really drops down the overall upside. And you're looking at a guy who qualified 10th, so does have some upside in place differential, but only if he's at the wheel. That's my take on that. 3 drivers at the back: Casey Kane, Jimmie Johnson, Matt DiBenedetto. All of those guys were qualified, I believe, 22 and beyond, so not a huge loss in starting position. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second here. Now on to my 4 favorite drivers. Expect this guy to be extremely chalky, but it's hard to look past Chase Elliott, $9,800. First thing I will say here in tournaments, I am likely to go underweight on Chase Elliott. I would expect him to be something in the 40% owned area. I'm probably going to come in between 25 and 30%. The reason being is everybody's looking at the fact that he has 3 straight second place finishes here. Well, he's starting 5th, so basically anything that he finishes below 5th is going to be a costly proposition, as there are some drivers who I think are in position and need the win. Elliott needs the win too, but I think if you're just basing the fact that he's finished 2nd here as your sole reason for wanting to play him, I just don't think that that's really a good enough reason. Like, could he win this race? Yes. Do I think he's going to win this race? I think he has one of the best odds of anybody going this week to win the race. But the reality of the situation is things can happen in NASCAR, and if you're putting all of your eggs, even half of your eggs, in one basket with Elliott, you could be in a lot of trouble if things don't work out. He's shown well on this type of track. He's a quality driver. He's got a lot to drive for, so that's why I'm not going to go completely naked on him, but I do want to be under-owned in comparison to the field. Next up, Jimmie Johnson, 9,100. Starting 22nd, but really starting 38th, 36th, 35th. I don't know, somewhere in that late area there. So unless you're under a rock, Jimmie Johnson one of the top drivers in NASCAR, has 3 wins on the season, does not need to start in the top 10 to do so. These are the best situations for him when he's starting from the back. I hope that people genuinely just get off of him. He has upside for a top 10 finish here. He's starting 22nd. If he gets the top 10 finish, you're talking about 12 place differential points. Not to mention somewhere between 36 and 40 points depending on where he falls. It's hard, and like I said earlier, I think with trying to move up through lap traffic and passing cars, Johnson is going to inadvertently rack up quite a few fastest laps, and those add up too. I don't see a reason to ignore him this week. I'm probably going to be higher than him than most, and I hope that works out to my advantage. The track record here has been spotty. I mean, we're not going to sit here and say that it's been great. Average position here, 16.5. Last 2, 6 and 10. If he's able to do that from the 22nd position, I'm happy. Happy camper, hopefully lower ownership. Next up, a guy who makes me extremely nervous, and as I was writing every word of this description, knew that this is going to come back to bite me by the end of the race. But Dale Earnhardt Jr. at 7,900, starting 19th, car showing speed in practices. He's happy with the car. All of these things scare the hell out of me because Dale Jr. has been, quite frankly, he's been basically the worst driver this season. I heard what Kevin Harvick said about him. 100% true. I've talked to guys, my uncle is a huge NASCAR fan growing up. Every time I see him, because now I'm into it when I wasn't before, I ask him, oh, you've been watching the races? Oh, I turn it on to see what Dale's doing, and once he's done, I turn it off. Yes, there's your evidence right there that Dale Earnhardt Jr. has absolutely killed the sport of NASCAR because unfair to him, because he's done so much good in so many different other areas, but he just has not lived up to his father's hype. Unfair for people to put that type of pressure on him, but in this year's has been awful. Doesn't know how to drive his car. When he does know how to drive his car, something always goes wrong. He's starting late, 19th. This is a top 10 car if nothing goes wrong. He finished 9th here earlier this year. I don't know what people are going to do with Dale. I think that you're going to have people who play Junior just because he's Junior. I think some portion of the DFS audience is just going to say, you know what, I'm sick of this crap. I'm sick of playing this loser where every time I put him in my lineup in a good spot, he can't figure out how to shift gears, or he gets bumped restarting and some weird thing goes wrong. But, if he finishes 9th again from 19, you're looking at over 40 fantasy points, maybe even closing in on 50 fantasy points. You can't shrug that off at $7,900. Makes me nervous, but I'm going to have that ownership. Next up and lastly, Daniel Suarez, 7,800. I could care less how he's looked in these track types or where he finished before. No one driving better in NASCAR right now than Daniel Suarez. I'm quite convinced maybe nobody wants it more than Daniel Suarez. This guy, I believe, now has 4 top 10 finishes. I think he'll be kind of shunned a little bit because he's not starting post 20. And he still has that rookie rub where you don't really know if you can trust him yet. I'm over that. I'm past that. He's done very well for me when I've used him the last few weeks. I'm not going to stop using him. I think he's another top 10 car. He's starting 16th. It's not the worst position for him by any stretch of the imagination. I would much, much rather play a guy who's trying for something and is going to push and is a smart driver, and I think might see lower ownership. If I think he's going to be around 20 to 25%, I probably want 35 to 40%. So that'll wrap it up this week. Thanks for watching. My apologies that it's been so sparse with NASCAR content. I'm dedicated through the stretch of the season to make sure I get on here and record these videos. In the meantime, please subscribe, check out researchfantasy.com, follow us on Twitter at Research and Win, and we'll see you again next week.